So, tonight I would like to talk about something I just read in Luke chapter 4. Luke chapter 4, this is when Jesus is first getting involved in his ministry, and he's teaching in one of the synagogues, and he's reading from the scroll of the prophet Isaiah, and he talks about how the Spirit of the Lord is upon him, and appointed him to proclaim good news to the poor, liberty to the captives, and liberty to those who are oppressed, which is like such an incredible message. Like, wow. So he then says to the whole synagogue, he stops reading and he's like, "Today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." And so everyone's kind of like, wait a second, like, this dude's from Nazareth, like, this dude's from, like, not to trash talk Florida, but he's, like, from, like, Dumpster Town, Florida, basically. So they're skeptical. And Jesus responds, saying this, like, semi-famous line, saying, "Truly I say to you, no prophet is acceptable in his hometown." And that kind of makes sense, but he goes on to talk about how in the days of Elijah, there were a lot of widows there, but Elijah went and did miracles in the house of a foreign widow. And in the days of Elisha, he didn't heal like an Israelite leper, but he healed a foreign leper. And then after he says that, when they heard these things, all in the synagogue were filled with wrath. So all this kind of led me to realize when Jesus is talking about no prophet being welcome or recognized in his hometown, Jesus wasn't talking about the people of Nazareth rejecting him and getting mad at him. He was talking about the people of Israel, which is made really clear in the context here, where he goes on to talk about the problem isn't just the fact that he comes from Nazareth, and throughout his entire ministry, like the number one people who are opposed to him are sort of like the top tier people in Israel. They were the religious elite. They were the people who were in with the government, the Herodians and stuff like that. The big politicians, the big teachers, religious leaders, all of that stuff, the celebrities, those were the main ones who opposed Jesus for many different reasons. They all had fairly their ideologies conflicted with each other, and yet they conspired together against Jesus, despite the fact that they kind of couldn't stand each other. And this kind of goes and once again, this idea is present in a whole bunch of his other parables. You think of the prodigal son, you think of the lost sheep, where Jesus isn't concerned with the sheep in the flock, but rather with the ones who are scattered abroad. And he says that any shepherd who isn't concerned about the sheep who aren't in the pen is a bad shepherd, while he is the good shepherd who does go to search for the other sheep. So anyways, I thought all of that was very, very cool. All of that, I think, comes to a huge head in the book of Acts, when Stephen starts preaching about how the temple isn't anything special, and how God's plan is bigger than just the nation of Israel and the temple and stuff like that. And he starts really catching on to this idea that God's plans are so much bigger and truly, international, truly worldwide. And when the Pharisees and temple leaders and all those people, when all of their power is based off of the fact that they are the special people, they are separate, their power is entirely through like raising up walls to prevent, the trashy people from being able to take part in, communion with God. This is incredibly threatening to them. This idea that it's not about your pedigree or your status or any of these other things. And it's not about buildings, and it's not about wealth or anything fancy, but merely about community and fellowship and togetherness and love. That's a huge threat to this religious establishment. So that comes to a head later in Acts, and Stephen gets killed for that. And it's super cool because the Apostle Paul actually takes up Stephen's mantle in his outreach to the Gentiles, after Paul himself had Stephen killed. He had a heart change, and he ended up being the missionary to the Gentiles, which is really, really cool. Yeah, I don't know. I love how all of this is really attached together, and yeah, yeah.